Okay, so I know just a while ago I posted updates. This is going to be more updates and hopefully the final video. So I already got feedback from Stanley and WCA. WCA did not like how the triangles were not obvious, which to me I was like, there's only one triangle. So I changed it to red, and this is red. So you can instantly tell, yeah, red, that's the 12 o'clock. Everything else, that's the other things. So that's one of the last changes. In my last video, I talked about how we gave Keenan a standard clock and then a magnetic levitating clock. I'll talk more about that too. So I started testing out new mechanisms because I have a mill and I have really nice means of producing things. So I decided, why do we have to stick to the old 1980s design? And I changed up the mech. It turns out that was too sluggish. But the biggest problem I wanted to solve is the gears. When they hit the bumps to click, there is a huge amount of force. Where's a good one? This is a decent one. So when the gear clicks, it has to overcome 4 bumps, and it moves out of axis. So it moves down a little bit. These over here, they still interface the bump, but they only interface one side, and then they'll like wobble. We need to make like a click mechanism where this doesn't move off axis, because that's a big source of friction, and these bumps causing that up and down motion is another source of friction. So I said to myself, well, if the magnetic way wasn't good, basically I had 12 magnets all around, another 12 magnets. I had it somewhere around here. Let me go get it. All right, so this is just a mock-up. You can see 12 magnets that I put into the frame. I used a mill so that it was accurate within the 1/10 of a millimeter, which in milling terms is actually really bad. But you can see how exact it is, both sides, and you can see the part I made. It interfaces all of those, and then it hit the gears. But the problem is it was too sluggish, and it was too much work, and we can't scale that up. So I went back to the drawing board, and I said to myself, if the problem is these gears moving like this when they're only supposed to turn horizontally, is these bumps. So what if I took the mill again and just did a quick circle pocket and removed it, so this gear in the middle doesn't touch any bump, and it just turns like, it just turns with no bumps whatsoever. But you still retain half the bump. So if you keep half the bump, these outer gears will still click. And the thing is, there's no motion on clock, which doesn't, there's no way you can make a move on clock without using 2 of these outer gears at any given time. So there are always 2 gears doing 1 bump each, instead of 3 gears, this one doing 4 bumps, this one doing 1 bump, this one doing 1 bump. And what you get is a clock where this, instead of having springs, you have a rigid axle that's lubricated on both sides. So the center is never encumbered and is never out of axis, and it doesn't have to overcome those 4 bumps. So you get a lot of an easier turning motion. So this is all 4 pins with my pinky. There we go. And try doing that with an out-of-the-box Ling-Ao. These will come out of the box where all four pins up with the pinky. That's how smooth it is. I don't know how else to portray how smooth this is. I don't have a torque wrench on me. But yeah, so just by doing that, we have all the advantages in even surpassing that of the maglev gears just by doing that. We could hypothetically put maglev in the 8 gears here, but we don't want to make this any more expensive on the end consumer. We don't want to waste any more time. We want this to get out as soon as possible for everyone. So I think I'm going to use my limited power to say, hey bosses, this is it. We're finalizing it. We're moving forward. this is the one we want to push. So red, 12 markers, magnetic buttons. This one's, it's still based on the Ling-Ao mechanism, so you can still get that where the gear will catch on here if it's not lined up perfectly. So you got the magnetic buttons. You can still see the clicks, even with the 4 in the middle removed, because like I said, you have those 2 gears always touching a bump no matter what. The last thing is I mentioned this. So you see here, there's that track, and it sharpens up towards the end. The buttons have that track to reduce friction, so they spin, they glide on these tiny tracks that taper to 1/8 of a millimeter. And these are the magnetic gears. So yep, the last thing I wanted to mention is I totally forgot to say why magnets are better than springs. And it's pretty obvious. When springs exert linear force, so the amount of force is proportional directly to how much you compress them. But with magnets, the force is much greater close than far. So when you have the gear and it has to bounce back 1 to 2 millimeters, it's not a lot of force until it gets really close, and then it pushes back. And that's why they're better than springs in that regard, definitely, unequivocally. Another way I thought about doing it is having a tiny floating spacer. And I thought this is magic because I don't think, let me test it real fast. Yeah, there's no way for both sides of these gears to spin at the same time. Correct me if I'm wrong. These small ones, they have to be actuated by the button gear, which cannot catch both of them at the same time. So you can actually have like a floating spacer that's only off by like 1 or 2 millimeters tops, and then use a really weak spring. And the role of that spacer is the spring no longer has to keep them separated, only has to push back. And this floating spacer would just prevent it from going too far into the body of the clock. And the spring would just push it back up as soon as it has a spot to do. And if you do it that way, you can use a really, really light spring. I might actually test that, but we have to move forward with the puzzle. And as is, it is already quite smooth. And if I were to do that, it would actually reduce the clicking. And this is already like at a really good spot. So thanks for listening to my long-winded clock video. This is the clock, and that's it. See you guys in the next video, and we really need to pre-release this, get pre-orders tomorrow, hopefully. We only have a certain number in stock, but we have 90 more coming from China soon. So we hope to really create a big batch that's enough for everyone. The problem is some people are out for the holidays, so we're a little short-staffed, and I'm gonna be spending Christmas with Mikey, so we'll hope to ship as soon as everyone's back from the holidays. That should be it for real. See you guys.